My name is Christine Zellers, and I'm the Family and Community Health Sciences Family and Community Health Sciences agent for Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Cape May County. And I'm joined today by Jen Sawyer Caraballo. I know I'm going to say it wrong. I told her that, who is the Agricultural and Natural Resources Program Associate. And also joining us tonight is Claudia Gil Arroyo, and she is the Agricultural and Natural Resources Agent. Jen is going to take it off in the beginning. She's going to be covering information from Agricultural and Natural Resources, and then I'll jump in at the end and cover the nutrition and family and community health sciences portion of this. Again, this is being recorded, and we will send out information at the end to everyone so that you can have resources.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here now that I'm on the wrong page. Okay. All right. So as Chris said, I am Jen Sawyer Caraballo. I am the Ag Natural Resources Program Associate for Commercial Agriculture at the Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Cape May County. And tonight I'm just going to quickly go over some information on growing basil, tomatoes, and summer squash zucchini. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. As I go through each section, I'll either Chris or Claudia will check the chat and let me know if there's anything there, and I'll try to answer questions as we go. All right, so basil, it's a favorite of many, not myself, but you know, it's a pretty popular, commonly grown garden herb that most people tend to grow along with their tomatoes. So you can start it from seed. You can buy established plants. In order to keep a bushier plant, you can pinch back the leaves as it's growing instead of getting kind of like that tall, leggy growth as it's growing. And you start pinching it back, it'll start growing vertically and you'll get a nice bushier plant. If it starts to go to flower, you can snip those off to slow seed production. That way you'll get more leaf production because the plant won't be putting all that energy into seed production. And you can actually have it inside. You can bring it inside for year-round use. So basil really likes to have a soil pH in the range of 6 to 7. It likes well-drained soil. You can grow it in pots. You can grow it directly in your garden, in the ground, in raised beds. Water, I always tell people to water all your plants, water them at the base because you want the water to go down into the roots. You don't really want to, you want to try to avoid getting any water on the leaves themselves. And when we have some hot spells, you want to make sure you keep it evenly watered because it will tend to wilt and burn up a little bit. It does prefer full sun, and full sun is at a minimum 6 hours, preferably 8 hours per day. Okay. And now my thing is not working, so. Okay. Oh, there we go. So as far as varieties go, it's really important to try to choose disease-resistant varieties and choose the type of flavor that you enjoy. There's some popular varieties. The Genovese is kind of your classic Italian leaf, you know, or not Italian leaf, but Italian standard. There's the Napolitano, which is a standard lettuce leaf. Romanesca has a very strong scent. Dolly is a heavy production of large leaves and it's more cold tolerant. There's Italian leaf or Di Genova, which is classic and it's a little bit sweeter than a Genovese. You can get things like cinnamon, citrus, clove, Thai, purple ruffles, dark opal, holy basil, and all of these have very distinct flavor profiles and aroma. Cinnamon, if you like your basil that tastes like cinnamon, then that would be a good one. Lemon and lime basil has a more citrusy scent. Thai basil, there are several types of Thai basil, such as Siam King or Queen, and that has an anise-like scent and taste. Holy basil is kind of sweet and spicy. There are just so many out there. If there's things that you have tried before, or something that you've had out at a restaurant and you like, kind of scan the seed catalogs and look for those. So Rutgers actually in the last several years has been developing sweet basil varieties that have been bred to resist basil downy mildew. So they're downy mildew resistant, so they'll have that DMR at the end of the name. Rutgers Devotion, Obsession, Thunderstruck, and Passion are the 4 that are available. And many of these you can now get through seed catalogs. I don't believe Rutgers is selling seeds at this time, but I have seen at least Devotion, Obsession, and Passion in seed catalogs. So you really want the downy mildew resistance. So if you've grown basil before and it's kind of gone gray and suddenly, you had nice basil and then within a couple of days to a week, you no longer have any basil, it's most likely downy mildew. And it starts forming on the underside of the leaves. You'll see this gray mildewy growth. So utilizing downy mildew resistant varieties will really kind of keep that from decimating your crop. If you use non-resistant varieties and you do start noticing the gray on the leaves, you can cut the plant back pretty far. Leave like maybe 4 inches at the base and remove any leaves that may have fallen off from the garden. You don't want to leave any of that disease residue near the plants. And most of the time they come back not quite as healthy, but if you catch it in time. But again, we highly recommend using the DMR varieties. Okay, so are there any questions on basil before I continue on to tomatoes? Chris or Claudia, are there any questions I can't see the chat.
Sorry, no, Jen, there's nothing in the chat at this time.
Thank you. All right, so tomatoes, lots of varieties to choose from. So there are different types, different growing types, vine types. So there's their determinate, which will only grow to a certain height, and the shoots terminate in a flower cluster. You'll have 1 or 2 leaves between each flower cluster. So as you watch your plant grow, you'll kind of see where they're going to flower, and you get a more concentrated yield. So determinants tend to grow, flower, and then ripen and mature all within a 1 or 2 week period. So that's great if you're growing varieties for canning, things like that, where you need a lot of tomatoes to process at the same time. Semi-determinate is somewhere between determinate and indeterminate. And then the indeterminate, the shoots will continue to grow with no terminal flower clusters. You'll get a couple, 3 to 4 leaves between your flower clusters, and the yield tends to be spread out throughout the growing season. And you are going to need some kind of trellising or support system for those. A lot of cherry tomatoes, especially, are of the indeterminate variety. And you'll notice that as the plant grows, you're going to get fruit on the newer growth. So, when you get your first couple of tomatoes, they'll be down at the bottom of the plant. And then those leaves will kind of get a little yellowy, and then you'll get flower clusters above that. And so it's always kind of with the new growth is where you're going to have your flower clusters and your mature tomatoes. And some of those indeterminate varieties can grow you know, good 10 feet or more. So you need to really think about what kind of space you have. If you have, you know, if you want to do trellising and keep up with all of that. So this is a chart from a Rutgers public kind of joint publication for tomatoes for New Jersey. A lot of these are actually commercially grown, but you can get them to grow in the home garden. And there's some early varieties. So if you want to try to have tomatoes throughout, you know, the growing season and not have to wait till August for the really good Jersey tomatoes, there are varieties such as Early Girl and 4th of July that you'll have fruit within about 50 days. They also have some disease resistance. And I'm not going to go through all what the V and the F and things, that's usually pretty well explained in your seed catalogs, what their different disease resistance are. And then there's some that will develop in mid-season. Your Better Boy, your Big Beefs, Celebrity is a really popular one you'll find at farm stands. And then a later season is the Ramapo that takes 85 days to mature. And it's also on an indeterminate. So you're going to spend a lot of time just kind of propping up those vines. But they have, you know, really big 12-ounce fruit. Now, heirlooms. Heirlooms are great. A lot of people like heirlooms. Now, heirlooms, I will warn you, do not have a lot of disease resistance because they have not been bred to have disease resistance. But if you like heirlooms and open pollinated things, that's a good way to go. You know, there's plum varieties. San Marzano are kind of the one a lot of people are looking for, or the Mariana, especially for canning, for making sauce, or if you're from the Philadelphia area, for making gravy. Cherry tomatoes, sweet 100s, grow like crazy. If there's just a few of you in the household, you probably only need one plant. You'll get quite a good amount of cherry tomatoes off of that. Sun Gold, those are good with a lesser acidity to them. And then you have your grape tomatoes. Juliet is a really good one. It's a really prolific producer. And it's, you know, it's not quite, you know, it's a good size, and, you know, it's a little bit bigger than the grape tomatoes you would get at the store. So those are definitely a good one. Now, tomatoes, they like their pH, the soil pH, to be between 6 and 6.5. They like a well-drained soil. Again, water at the base. And you want to have slow, deep watering. Most plants, especially tomatoes, need up to 1 inch of water per week. And you really want to keep on top of it during hot spells. And tomatoes prefer full sun. 8 hours a day is preferable. You will have fruit if you can't, you know, at 6 hours per day of full sun, but the plants may not be as prolific. So make sure you have a really good all-day sunny spot to put your tomatoes in. One thing with tomatoes, when it gets really hot in July and August, in the middle of the day, the plants will wilt. But they will also wilt if you overwater them. So, you know, if they're kind of wilty in the morning before it gets really hot, you know, check your soil, make sure you're not giving them too much water. That may be what's going on. But don't be too discouraged if they're kind of a little wilty during the hottest part of the day. They'll perk up when the sun goes down and look nice and happy the next morning. Okay, any questions for tomatoes? Let me check.
Jen, we did have one in the chat from back to basil. I have a baby basil growing, which leaves are brown. The person said. I don't know.
Okay, so I guess my questions would have to be, though, is the basil, is it outside? Is it inside? Is it in full sun? Did you start it from seed? You know, if it's still pretty small and the leaves are brown, It could be a nutrient deficiency. It may not be getting enough water, or it could be, and a lot of nutrient deficiencies have to do with a pH problem. And you can always, if you wish, we have a horticultural helpline at our office that I am in charge of. You can always bring in some samples or email me some photos, and I can help try to figure out what's going on with your basil. Oh, just parts of leaves. Yeah, so then I would definitely, if you can, I'll have my email up at the end of my section. And, you know, if you can send me some pictures, I can try to help you out with that. Okay, so tomatoes. I bought tomatoes in pots in the last few weeks, bringing them in and out. Some of their leaves look yellower. So I would say tomatoes naturally, as they grow, the bottom leaves will get yellow. But if you're having an overall plant yellowing problem, it's more likely a nutrient deficiency in the soil. And if you're able to leave them out, and if it's going to get really cold at night, I would suggest leaving them outside but covering them. Like, you can cover them with an old sheet or something, just to kind of keep the heat in. Because if you're bringing them in and out and there's a bigger temperature change between inside and outside, that can also stress the plant out a little bit. And again, you know, if it seems to be an overall yellowing, then you can bring in some samples of leaves or email pictures to me, and I can try to help you out with that. Okay. All right. And now I can't, there we go. So on to summer squash. Summer squash is a Cucurbita pepo, and that includes your zucchini that everybody, you know, recognizes, the green zucchini. There's crookneck, straight neck, patty pan, and other similar types. There are bush varieties and vining varieties. And the plants, you'll notice they have separate male and female flowers. And there's just a nice little picture of different varieties. There are heirloom varieties. They're very easily started from seed, but direct sowing is best. So you'll want to plant them straight into the garden. You can actually start doing that, you know, anytime now, as long as your soil temperature is probably, I think, around 60 degrees or so. And so you can also, because we do have a little bit of issue earlier on in the season with squash vine borers, which if you've grown squash before, they bore a little hole in the stem, and you'll see kind of all this like goop, and then one day you go out and like your plant's just totally wilted. You can succession plant them. So, you know, throughout the season, you can, if you've lost some to the squash vine borer, you can plant some new seeds, because squash vine borer tend to be earlier in like this time of year and aren't too much of a problem later in the season. If you have a really big area for growing, you usually space your rows about 5 to 6 feet apart, and then plants are 2 to 3 feet apart in the row. When you're buying seeds or buying plants, always check the seed packet or the label to see how big the mature plant's going to be, and make sure you have space for it. The good thing now is there are more varieties that are coming out that you'll see on the seed packet that says great for container growing, and it'll tell you the size of the container that you should grow it in, like a 12-inch pot, etc. And just because it says container grown, you can still, it doesn't have to be in a container, you can still grow it in the ground. So again, the soil pH range should be 6 to 6.5, well drained. You can grow it in raised beds in the ground. You can grow it, you know, in containers. There are a lot of container varieties out there, which are the bush varieties. Water at the base. Keep them evenly watered during hot spells. So a lot of, you know, all of these things kind of have the same type of of care and need 6 to 8 hours of full sun per day. And you can side dress the plants with some fertilizer when they either begin to vine out, or as if you have a bush variety, as it begins to grow, with some nitrogen heavy fertilizer. And that'll just kind of help increase some of that green growth. Okay. Again, try to choose disease-resistant varieties. The cucurbits do tend to succumb to powdery mildew, which you'll see kind of a whitish on the top side of the leaves, unlike downy mildew, which starts to develop on the underside of the leaves. Powdery mildew will be on the upper side of the leaves and on the stems. You can use fungicides for that. But if you can find some disease-resistant varieties, that's your best choice. Choose varieties that are best suited to your growing conditions, whether you're growing in the ground versus containers. If you're growing in the ground, then binding varieties are great. If you're in containers, you're going to want to choose some bush varieties, or if you're, you just have a couple of small raised beds or just a small garden area, bush varieties are a good one. There are now spineless varieties, which have little to no spines on the leaves and stems, which makes picking more pleasant. And as someone that used to do the harvesting at a farm, I made sure that we use spineless varieties as much as possible, because then you don't have all those horrible prickles that just drive you nuts all day long. So some of the squash varieties, the straight neck are Cougar, Lioness, Multi-Pack, Seneca Prolific, Sunray. Now these are ones that are recommended by Rutgers for growing in New Jersey. Then you have your scallop types, which are your Peter Pan, so like your patty pan squash, Starship and Sunburst. And then zucchini types, which will be your green, which is Lynx, Payroll, Revenue, Tigress, and Wildcat. Again, there are heirloom varieties out there that really don't have much disease resistance. Other than squash vine borer, the other would be, the other pest is a squash bug, and they would need to, once the nymphs start, if you don't catch the little clusters of kind of orangey, very, very well spaced on the underside of the leaves, you'll see the eggs. They're very easy to spot. You can scrape them off, but if you miss some and you get squash bugs, you're going to want to try to use some insecticide to get rid of them, because they will suck the juices out of the plant. The plant will wilt. They'll also damage the fruit as well. Okay, so I'm going to see if there are any questions.
You do have one question, Jen. It says, Debbie says, I have raised garden beds. If some squash plants are killed by the vine borers, can I pull up the plant and replant in the same area? I'm limited by area. I do use BT injections into the main stem.
Okay, yes. So you can pull that plant out. And I would suggest if you're replanting in the time period when the moth that is the squash vine borer is still active, that you put some kind of lightweight row cover or screen over the plant as it's growing. Just make, the lightweight row cover allows it to get enough light to grow, but it also prevents the moth from being able to get in there and lay its egg, which turns into the larva that does all the damage. Okay. All right. If there's no more questions, that's my email there, sawyer@njaes.rutgers.edu. And that's my extension 3615, or you can call the helpline at 3635. And if you were part of this class, just let me know. Oh, okay. So no, you would not have to pollinate themselves. I would, once the plant starts to flower or gets to the stage where it's flowering, you can take the screening off. Especially, once the moth is no longer active, you shouldn't have a problem. Okay, yes, you can I bring potted basil indoors before frost, and how long can it live? So yes, you can. It depends on if you have proper lighting. It's going to still need a lot of light to kind of keep going. And if you keep pinching it back and give it a little bit of fertilizer, it should last through the winter. And you can always start some again, late summer. So it's a bit of a younger plant and bring them in, and that should last probably till the spring. Okay, any other questions?
All right,
All
Jen,
right.
we stop
Well-
sharing. And if anybody has questions at the end for Jen that you think of as I'm presenting, then we will gladly go back to those. I'm just going to share my screen here. As I'm sharing my screen, I just wanted to ask everyone to please put, if you're here to get wellness points, you wanted to get the wellness points, could you please put your name in the chat? We did something a little bit different, so I just want to make sure that we're getting oops, wrong screen. I just wanted to make sure that we're getting everybody included that needs to get wellness points if there's people in that situation. So hold on 1 second. There we go. All right, so as I said in the beginning, my name is Christine Zellers, and I am the Family and Community Health Sciences educator. And I work with Jen and Claudia in the office there, and we decided to team up for this. So Jen did a great job of explaining a lot of the ways to grow basil and summer squash and tomatoes. And now I'm going to talk to you about the health benefits of them. And then we're going to talk about how to prepare and cook these fine things, maybe give you some ideas. And then we're also going to talk about preserving them and some recipe ideas. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I do send out information at the end. So any of the recipes I mentioned here tonight, I'll follow up with you with the recording of the video if you want to share it or look at it again, as well as information from Jen and information from myself. So, please feel free to ask questions and I'll get to those if you have any. I'm not advancing. Here we go. All right. So since tomatoes are actually a vegetable, we'll get that out of the way first. They're in their own right a nutritious food. So we know that fruits and vegetables are healthy options for us for numerous reasons. But I did want to address the question right off the bat about whether or not tomatoes are a vegetable or a fruit. I even get arguments about this from children. But technically they are fruits because they contain seeds. However, because they're eaten like vegetables, and prepared most of the time like vegetables, the USDA, and for purposes of nutrition education, which is what I do, classifies them or refers to them as vegetables. And it's actually a hot topic about this, and the kids giggle about it all the time, trying to convince me that, it's one or the other. But in 1887, the US Supreme Court ruled that tomatoes are vegetables. So I guess there's been a lot of debate through the years about this, but also the state fruit here in New Jersey. So our fruit is the tomato. However, in Ohio, the state vegetable is a tomato, and Arkansas, playing right down the line, both the fruit and the vegetable, fruit and state vegetable are the tomato. So, whatever you like, I guess. The bottom line is it doesn't matter to me because they're wonderful tasting and they're great to have, especially here in New Jersey in the summertime. So vegetable, tomato, whatever you like, but just a little bit of fun history for you there to have a discussion at your dinner table, I guess, one night. So I wanted to point out a lot of the, there are great benefits to eating tomatoes. First off, you can see here tomatoes are high in fiber, and fiber is a really important part of our diet. And that's for several reasons. It keeps our bodies regular and it helps us to maintain a healthy weight. It also reduces the incidence of heart disease, diabetes, diverticulitis disease, colon cancer, and constipation. It is recommended by the dietary guidelines that adults eat 25 to 30 grams of fiber each day. However, the average American only eats about 15 grams a day. So we're significantly lacking in that area. And there has been a push to help educate the American community about the fact that we need to eat more fiber. An average tomato only has about 1.8 grams of fiber, and that's, obviously not a lot in the scheme of things, but it does contribute to that 25 to 30 grams that we need per day. And, you can add tomatoes in different ways, or salads, sandwiches, wraps, but it can really help to boost your fiber intake, and every little bit helps. So wherever you can add to that fiber intake, that's important. The fiber that is in tomatoes is insoluble fiber, which means that it is water insoluble, and that means it moves through the digestive tract pretty much unchanged, but that helps move the waste through our body and promote normal movement of the intestinal tract. So it has that advantage for us, and it is a good form of fiber. Lycopene I have on here as well. Because of lycopene in tomatoes, they're very helpful in preventing heart disease, which is important. I'm going to talk a little bit more about lycopene in a minute, but vitamins and minerals in tomatoes also include folate, or B9, and that's important for cell development. That's especially important for women who are or plan to become pregnant. So those women that are in childbearing age groups, that folate is important for us. Tomatoes also have vitamin K1 for blood clotting, and potassium, which is an essential nutrient, and it's really helpful for controlling blood pressure and preventing heart disease. One medium tomato has 28% of the recommended daily allowance of vitamin C, and that really is helpful for our immunity. And as we've discovered over the last few years, immunity is an important part of life, to reducing disease and infection and viruses and whatnot. So tomatoes, good way to help with that immunity. Tomatoes are also low in calories, so it fills us up because of that fiber that they contain, but it doesn't really pump up the amount of calories we have, and it'll keep us full for longer. I did mention that I was going to talk about lycopene in a minute, and lycopene has been studied more recently because of its popularity that it's received in the news media. Usually when there's a study that has some interesting fact in it, the news media will pick up on that. And lycopene is it's what gives the tomatoes and other red and pink fruits and vegetables their beautiful color. So that beautiful color that you see in some of the slides I have here, that's from the lycopene. And it also helps again with the heart disease prevention, and it also actually helps with prevention of sunburn. But that's not to say that you should just leave your sunscreen at home this weekend when you go to the beach. You still need to take sunscreen with you, but the lycopene can help you with an added protection of sunscreen for the skin. Lycopene also has antioxidants in it, and that helps to protect against free radicals. And too many free radicals in a person's body can lead to certain cancers. It's been shown to lead to Alzheimer's disease and heart disease. And lycopene's ability to reduce these free radicals has been shown to help cholesterol levels. So it helps to lower cholesterol levels, the bad cholesterol, the LDL, and it helps to help the good cholesterol, the HDL, and it also helps to prevent heart disease because of that. And there was a study done in PubMed where researchers found that the likelihood of premature death decreased by 39% among participants who had higher lycopene blood levels. And as I said, there's been several large studies done on the benefits of lycopene that also help prevent prostate and lung cancers. And originally, it was thought, these studies showed a very high percentage of the number of cases in males being reduced for the prostate cancer. However, more recent studies have shown that there's a number, the number is lower than what the original study showed, but there is still a significant reduction, and just not as much as it was in the early studies. It's also worth mentioning that when a study is released showing very good outcomes, like I said, the news media will really pick this up. They'll tout it as the next miracle cure for everything. But the thing to remember is that we really need to eat a balanced diet. So eating from all the different food groups, eating a variety of those foods is always a good idea. And that's why I really like that we're including several different vegetables in this talk for Eat What You Grow tonight, because it's not just about one vegetable being a cure-all, it's about maintaining a healthy diet with a lot of variety in it. Oops. Okay. So I spoke a lot about lycopene in the last slide. And one thing I want you to consider about lycopene is that when you cook tomatoes, it breaks down the thick cell walls, and therefore it increases the absorption of lycopene for us. Raw tomatoes only allow us to absorb about 4% of the lycopene, but that's not really to say that eating tomatoes cooked is the be-all end-all. When we eat cooked tomatoes and sauces, for instance, it lowers the fiber amounts that we're getting because it's more of a puree. Same with the case of like ketchup. So ketchup, even though back in, what was that, the 80s, Ronald Reagan said that it could be a vegetable in school meals, there's a lot of sugar in ketchup. So again, you can get the lycopene because it's a cooked thing, cooked form of the tomato, but there's also a lot of sugar. So you want to watch that, eating that. So, you know, in any case, eat tomatoes a variety of ways. You want to eat them cooked and raw, so you get that balance from the vegetable, from the lycopene and then the fiber. Adding tomatoes or you know, to salads and sandwiches and omelets or burritos, that allows you to bump up your vitamins and minerals, and you get added flavor and taste from it. And we're going to talk in a minute here about canning from your garden, or, you know, using tomatoes to can. And after, like I said, after the presentation, I am going to share with you some recipes. One of the things I love to make in the summer is grabbing some tomatoes from the garden and making some fresh salsa. So I'll share a recipe with you for that. It's great, you know, on Sunday evening when you're maybe coming home from the beach or something like that, to enjoy as a nice healthy snack. So as I said, adding the tomatoes to salads and sandwiches, omelets, and burritos, that's a great way to really bump up those different ways we eat them. Soups and salsa is another great way. You can also have tomato juice, obviously, but again, you're pureeing in that, and you're not getting the fiber attached. You can also enjoy tomatoes when they're roasted with other vegetables, which is a great way to eat them. You can have fried tomatoes, which is one of my favorites. I learned that from my grandmother. But just make sure that when you're making different recipes that you're not adding a lot of fat and salt or frying them too often, because that could, you know, really increase it could undermine your ability to have the nutrients that you're looking for there, depending on how you're preparing them. Also, I'm going to send a recipe out for a great soup that I make, a tomato basil soup that I'll share with you afterwards. But it's really, you can use it in the wintertime with the canned tomatoes that maybe you've canned, or you could, you know, use the fresh ones and roast them. All right, so in the picture here, you see this beautiful, all different color heirloom tomatoes, which look magnificent. And these tomatoes are not always the deep red that sometimes we're used to, but with the exception of the heirlooms here, when you do pick a tomato that you're going to eat, you want to try to make sure it's deep red, or in the case of the heirlooms here that have their deep colors, make sure they have those nice deep rich colors of the orange, green, purple, or yellow. And make sure you're choosing tomatoes from the farm stand or the market that don't have blemishes on them or bruises. If they do, just cut around them and don't eat that part. And the tomato should always be nice and dense and firm, but you don't want it to be over hard because that might mean that it's not quite ripe yet. And when you cook or eat tomatoes, they should always be washed, and running them under cool water. Sometimes I know people like to use I use a vegetable brush sometime on things like potatoes and things, but if you use the brush, be really cautious with tomatoes because you could damage the skin. So you don't want to go too hard. Sometimes it's just easier to kind of, use your hands to wash them. And you can obviously eat the tomatoes with or without the skin, whatever your preference is. All right, so a little bit about preserving. As we talk about preserving tomatoes, I really want to emphasize the need to follow that recipe exactly. This is especially critical when canning tomatoes or tomato products. Acidity is critical to keeping the tomato base preserve safe. And again, we don't want to make anybody sick. Some people say, oh, my grandmother did this different than that's in the recommendations today. But the recommendations today are based on science. And the science shows us that these pH levels in tomatoes today are different than they have been in past years because there's new varieties out. Further, the alkaline or acidity levels, they need to be followed for the recommendations exactly, and they can vary as well. And so you want to make sure you're using a trusted source to create the perfect preserve for tomatoes. Also, salsa is one that you could can, but especially note as you should not change the recipe again prior to canning by adding extra spices or in addition or anything like that. You want to go exactly what that recipe calls for to can that salsa, and you shouldn't add cornstarch or anything to thicken it because that after you open the jar, it can really, you wait till after you open the jar to thicken it. Don't do it beforehand. You want to follow that salsa canning recipe exactly as it is. It can change up doing so can change up the recipe. It could cause for bacteria to grow and other things that will not make your harvest so enjoyable. And we want to make sure that it's enjoyable year round. And I will, in the follow-up email again that I have for you, I have several ways that areas where you can and suggestions on where to get that good information. So I just wanted to give you a little bit about safe ways to can, the do's and don'ts of preserving. And this goes for all foods, not just tomato what we're talking about tonight. But overall, if you're canning or preserving, make sure that you are using a USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, or a National Center for Home Preservation, or a university extension or website such as Rutgers Cooperative Extension or one of the other ones across the country. These sites really stay up to date on the latest science and practices to use for safe food handling and preserving. And using another source, there's a lot of people, they make videos online, social media, let's do this, let's do that, but they're not using the science behind it probably. So you want to make sure it's one of these trusted sites that we have on here to use. And also, it's important because you don't want to risk anybody getting sick. There's varying amounts of acidity, like I said, and the pH levels. So you just want to make sure that everything is up to science-based knowledge. For the don'ts list, please make sure not to use those blogs or sites that alter changed tested recipes, and don't use shortcuts or untested recipes. And remember to only use recipes from the sites that I listed, which were the extension, the USDA, and the canning. Further, you should always avoid recipes that have been handed out for generations. I know it's a great thing to have. Maybe it's a good thing to, keep somebody's handwriting that wrote it down as a memento. But again, our food supply is very, very different than what our grandmothers was. So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is up to date and accurate. Websites that end in the .gov or the .edu are trusted sources. But, somebody bopping around on TikTok is probably not. And you also want to make sure that canning and preserving any fruit or vegetable means that you want to use ripe, undamaged produce. It's not the stuff you find that fell off the vine on the bottom of the plant. You want to make sure you're using the best quality produce to can, no matter what you are preserving. All right, just as Jen talked about summer squash and zucchini, I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. There is a difference between the zucchini and squash, but as we mentioned in the growing part of the discussion, they're very much the same. So I'm going to treat them as such too. They look much the same, a little bit of a different color there. The yellow squash has a bulbous end and more of a bright yellow skin, but zucchini can also have a yellow color to it. Both grow like fruit and have the seeds and a flower, but they're considered vegetables because of the way they're cooked, much like our tomato friend. Both yellow squash and zucchini have a variety of nutrients that promote good health benefits. So both are high in vitamin A, which supports a healthy immune system and good vision. And in fact, 1 cup of zucchini has 40% of the recommended daily intake of vitamin A. Cooked zucchini contains slightly more vitamin A than raw, but both cooked and raw have a nice dose of that vitamin A. They contain B and C vitamins, which helps the body's ability to heal and maintain good cell energy, while also providing us with some energy. One of the B vitamins in squash is folate, which again is just like the tomatoes, helps with the cell development. And magnesium is also an important mineral because it supports bone strength and helps the body's ability to process fats and carbohydrates. Inappropriate dietetic habits are estimated to be the cause of more than 1/3 of cancer deaths, according to an article that was published by Ferdinand Belmar et al. And zucchini and squash contain many of the protective elements of cancer prevention diet, you know, with that vitamin B, has antioxidants, lutein, and folate. And there's also evidence that it's a good part of an anti-cancer diet. So in addition to the previously mentioned vitamins benefit that these vegetables have, they also have strong cancer prevention contents. They also have a high water content, which means they're low in calories, like many other vegetables. And squash and zucchini they'll keep you full longer because they are, you know, they have that fiber attached to it, but they're not a high caloric food. And zucchini and squash also boast a high fiber content, as you would imagine, and that keeps everything moving, as we discussed with the tomatoes. So that's going to help us with preventing disease as well. And we've all heard a lot about good gut health and seen it in advertisements, but good gut health is important for good overall health. And zucchini and squash contain soluble and insoluble fiber. And soluble fiber feed the good bacteria in our gut and make more friendly bacteria that then produce short chain fatty acids that nourish our gut cells. So zucchini and squash make for a healthy gut, which in turn promotes overall good health for us. Usually right around this time of year, maybe a little early yet, but you know, we all know that point in the season where in the summer where we just get so many zucchini or summer squashes growing that we don't know quite what to do with them, right? You go to somebody's house and they're handing you zucchini and yellow squash. So enjoying these vegetables is good. You know, it's a good, important part of the summertime, and it has great benefits to our health, as we just mentioned. But, you know, if you're going to try to use them in some of these recipes, try to use some that aren't so loaded with fat and sugar, again, and salt, so that you're not ending up outdoing the great benefits that we just mentioned. It's a little bit counterproductive to add some of those things in that we probably don't need. So, you know, the great thing to do with zucchini, you can prepare and enjoy it while from a home garden and produce it. You know, they produce that a lot. Don't add the fat and sugar. Also, you know, they're great to add into a main dish. We went to our son's a couple weeks ago and he grilled some up. He put a little bit of marinade on there and just threw the zucchini on a pan on the grill. And I'll tell you, it was fantastic. So you can marinate it. You can have it as a main dish, a side dish. use it in breads and desserts, or even use it, shred it up and put it on your salad as a little extra vitamin boost in your salad. Obviously, you can boil, saute, or bake, or even eat the zucchini raw. You know, if you're doing a dip or something in the summertime, chop them up into some, you know, long, thin slices and use them with the dip. And it's a good idea too to use them to moisten. You know, you can shred them up and use them to moisten other cakes. Just to make them a little bit moister and get those extra nutrients in there. And one of the things I'm going to share with everybody that was registered is a recipe for the zoodles. So we'll send out a way to do I think it's a creamy zoodles bake, which is yummy. And I will say about the zoodles, if you don't know what they are, they're when they make this like a spaghetti string type thing with the noodle, like make a fake spaghetti noodle out of zucchini or squash. They're sometimes expensive, pre-cut like that in the grocery store. So you can get a little doohickey that does it yourself, a little little handheld machine, or some of the attachments on different food processors and whatnot will do it for you if you're looking to save money and still like to eat those zoodles as a nice treat. So for preserving the squash and zucchini, it's great to have things all year long, but it's recommended that canning directions be followed. As I said, you can use the ball and the ball container recommendations too, but make sure that it's an up-to-date one if you're going to use those, because they work again to keep it up to date with what the USDA recommends and all the different entities. With summer squash and zucchini, it is a low acid vegetable, so it requires pressure canning, and that then destroys the bacteria that causes botulism. But it's not quite known the time needed to kill that bacteria, so that renders it unsafe. So the recommendations for preserving this is to use a blanching method and then freeze it in a freezer bag or a container. And that way you have it to keep for the summer. Make sure to label it, the date and all that kind of stuff after you blanch and freeze it. Again, use that young squash with tender skin. You want to make it look good. If it looks good on the outside, it'll preserve or, freeze and blanch well. Cut it in half. You want to wash and cut it in 1/2-inch slices. And you can water blanch it for about 3 minutes, cool it promptly, drain it and package it. And, leave a little bit of headspace when you do that. And again, seal and label. Also with the zucchini, it can be grated for baking and frozen by, picking those good tender zucchini, wash and grate it, steam it, blanch it, steam blanch it in a small quantity. Up to 2 minutes until it's about translucent, and then pack it in measured amounts into containers, leaving about 1/2 inch of headspace, and cool by placing the containers in cool water. You should never put hot things in the refrigerator. Just a sidebar here. So if you're got done making chili or something, don't take the hot chili pot and put it in the refrigerator, because that is going to heat up the whole refrigerator. It could cause some things in the refrigerator not to be at the temperature it needs to be. So make sure to cool first. Again, seal and label this. And if the zucchini is watery when you defrost it after this method, then discard the liquid before you use the zucchini. So kind of maybe squeeze it out a little bit to get rid of that. The one zucchini product that you can safely preserve by canning is zucchini pineapple. And that's because of that research behind it. So I'm going to share the recipe for that. But again, it works with that acidity level to make sure that it is safe. All right, then last but not least, we have basil and herbs here. I'm going the opposite direction of Jen, but we're okay on that. Basil does have antioxidants and vitamin K in it. There's calcium, magnesium, and potassium, as well as dietary fiber. But people aren't usually eating like a basil salad. So we don't consume great amounts of it at the same time. So it is a green leaf, but it doesn't necessarily, because of the amount we're consuming, it doesn't give us a significant amount of nutrients from basil. Basil and other herbs can add great color. They also add great flavor to dishes, and they're low in calories. They're low in calories, they're low in fat, sodium and cholesterol. And it's really a great way, especially basil is a great way, but all, herbs are a great way to flavor your food to get rid of some of that sodium. So instead of adding salt to your dish or buying something that's maybe packaged with a lot of salt, try using basil to flavor that product so it tastes good for you. If you want to figure out how much to use, so say for instance, you're using a recipe that calls for fresh herbs. If the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of a finely cut fresh herb like basil, then the equivalent of that would be the equivalent of 1 teaspoon of crumbled dry herbs. So if you don't have the fresh, you could use the fresh tablespoon. You could use the teaspoon of crumbled dry herbs. And then if you don't have either of those, to make the same equivalent, you could use 1/4 to a 1/2 teaspoon of the ground up herbs, or the powdery type. So I just wanted to give you that transformation, because I know sometimes you don't have it right on hand and the recipe calls for it. You're like, oh no, I don't have fresh basil, but you can make that substitution to get where you need. Great ways to add basil and herbs into your day. Some of my favorite, they're listed out here, a lot of them, but just to point out, great way to use it is to use it in a salad dressing. Use it as the base for a salad dressing. It's going to give a lot of flavor to that salad dressing. Add it to grilled cheese or pizza. I love grilled cheese. One of my favorite, grilled cheese sandwich with that nice big piece of Jersey tomato and some basil. It's yummy. And then you could also even use basil to flavor your water. So some people say, oh, I don't get enough water, I don't like to drink water. And people add cucumbers or lemon and lime. Add some basil and give a little bit different flavor. And then also I've added it to lemonade before. So be creative and add basil in different ways to different things. But they, listed there are a bunch of different ways that you can use basil to spice things up a little. Preserving herbs is a nice way to eat what you've grown, and basil can be brought inside and used throughout the winter. As somebody asked the question, can I bring it in? Sure. But if you're not having any success with bringing it in, then drying and preserving herbs is another way that you can save them. And I'll give you a little information on that in a second, a few pointers about that. But shown here, I like when at the end of the season, when you have all that basil and you're like, yikes, what am I going to do with this? I make basil pesto cubes. So I make the pesto as I normally would, and you can see here I'm putting it into a ice cube tray, a plastic ice cube tray. I freeze it, and then I wiggle it like you would wiggle it to get the ice cubes out, and I put it inside of a plastic freezer Ziploc bag, label it, put the date on it. And then when I'm looking for a quick dinner, I got to teach a class at night or something, I grill up some chicken, throw that basil cube on top with a little mozzarella cheese, and you have a really nice meal. It's real simple. So, and you can again add that into sauces, put it over top of pasta or something like that. But it makes it so you have it on hand at all times. So just a little idea there to keep it preserved for a little while in a different way. Here's some other options to preserve your fresh herbs. And again, this doesn't have to be just basil. It could be any of the herbs. Shown here, we have the paper bag method, which is the first one, and the herbs are placed stem side down. So you're going to have the stem, you're going to place them with the leaves inside, and then the stem's going to go up to the top. And then this allows for any of the seeds or anything to kind of fall off, and if any of the leaves fall off when they're dried, they're caught in the bag. You'll notice here that there's holes punched in the bag for ventilation, and the top's tied off with string to prevent dust from getting in. And you can also use that to hang the herbs with, so they don't get crushed up like in a drawer on a counter or something like that, until you're ready to use them as you wish. There's also dryers. So you'll see there that there's an example. It looks like they have maybe some rosemary there drying. So you can use a dryer in the center picture that's shown. And you can also use a microwave oven. You want to make sure, if you're going to use the microwave way to dry herbs, that you're you're cautious. They can really heat up quickly and they can actually catch on fire. So, be cautious with that. And I will share again, some information, locations to do these type things if you'd like to try them on your own. And I am giving, I think it's June 15th, I'm giving a virtual presentation that you can find the registration for at Ocean City Library or on our webpage. On basic canning and preserving information. So if you're interested in finding out more information, you're welcome to join us for that conversation. And then the last picture here shows the use of oil and herbs. Like I said, I use the ice cube tray first to do it, but you can use herbs, mix them in there with some oil and then put them into the Ziploc bags so that you have them to add to different dishes throughout the year. So the bottom line here is basil and other herbs they offer a good opportunity to spice food up. They don't add calories, salt, or fat, and they make a great addition to meals to really make them nice and tasty. If you're growing them on your own, you're getting a little exercise from gardening too. That helps, right? And then more herbs equals less salt consumption. So make sure that you're trying the foods, finding fun ways to add those herbs in and keep the salt out to keep us healthier overall, both ourselves and our families. And here are all the references for the different sections here. And then finally, here is my contact information. Now it looks like we have quite a few.
Oh, okay, there's actually just 2 questions for you.
Good, I like that.
Is it true that tomato provides more lycopene after being cooked?
Yeah, so that let's go back to that slide. It is true. And what I said about that was, nope. Where is it? Yeah. So what, I guess it doesn't have it on the slide, sorry. Yeah, but so there is more lycopene. It does increase when we cook it. So you'll get a benefit there, but then what happens is that it does, break down the cell wall. So it doesn't have as much fiber. So the raw tomatoes, we only absorb about 4% of the lycopene, whereas in the cooked ones, it's more significant. But you're kind of trading off. So you're losing fiber for the lycopene and vice versa. So a mixture of both cooked and raw is a good way to go.
Okay, and then the other one was, will you be providing directions for blanching and freezing zucchini and squash?
Yeah, so I have a bunch of websites that I'm going to share with y'all that have this information on them, and mostly cooperative extension from across the nation, my colleagues from across the nation that are doing this work specifically. So yes, I will share that information with you. So you'll have a couple opportunities, and it's some of them are the preserving the herbs, some of them are the canning of different things. So check them out and you might get some good ideas. But yes, I will give you directions on that blanching information in there, along with some recipes.
Okay, and then there's another question on lycopene. What other vegetables provide lycopene?
So when you think about lycopene vegetables, think about those vegetables that are pink and red. And a lot of time, you'll hear me say, if you've ever attended one of my other classes, eat a variety. And it's important to eat a variety, but there's certain vegetables that pack a little bit more punch for different areas of vitamins and minerals. So the pink and reds are good with the lycopene. And so, you can think about other things that have pink and red, like grapefruit, I'm thinking of, like those type of things, like they're all going to have more lycopene in them. I think tomatoes probably got, I don't know the exact amounts in each one, but tomatoes probably got a good chunk of time out of the news media. And that's why it's popular and everybody knows about the lycopene in tomatoes because of the studies that were done on it. But other vegetables have their wonderful advantages too. The white and tans have the potassium in them. It's not just bananas. So when you think about the nutrients in different vitamin or different fruits and vegetables, think about those colors, those phytochemicals, because they give you that needed nutrition that you're looking for across the board in those colors. And that's why we eat a variety. I do just want to remind everybody that if you have, if you're